back to Life Enrichment with Hank Ballinger. Today I want to talk about how to get a loan. Now, I know sometimes when you go to the bank and you're going to ask a guy for a lot of money, maybe $100,000, maybe $1 million, maybe more, it can be a little scary, especially your first time or two. So it's a little nerve-wracking. So want to go over some of the do's, don'ts, some of the things you kind of need to have prepared, or just let you know what they will be asking for. So want to go over that today, how to get a loan. Very important that you do certain things. So before we get into that, I'd like to say again, thanks for watching. Appreciate all those who watch and subscribe. Again, we encourage you to share with others and encourage them to share with others also. Again, our goal for this channel is to help people get out of the rat race, to be able to build wealth, to set goals, accomplish those goals, whatever those goals may be. We would love to help in that endeavor. So again, thanks those who have watched and subscribed, and please share it with others. Now, if you're going to go to a bank and get a loan, there are some things, just like anything you do in life, most things, there is a certain system you need to follow. There's a protocol. So let's say you're going to go to the bank, but you've always dealt with good old Banker Bill, so I've dealt with him for 20, 25 years. So I'm going to deal with Banker Bill, and every time I get a loan, Banker Bill's getting that loan. Well, what about if Banker Joe down the road would give you a better interest rate, maybe just to get your business, or maybe he would give you a longer amortization time, a longer time to pay it off. So find a bank that will give you the loan you want. You don't always just have to go to one bank just because you've dealt with Banker Bill for 20 years and just get whatever he gives you. Call around, call several banks. It doesn't only have to be in your community. It could be in a neighboring city, a neighboring county, a neighboring state, if you live close to the state line. You don't have to build bank loyalty just because you always have dealt with this guy. Make sure that you're getting the loan that is best tailored for you. Now, there are certain things you need to look for when you go to the bank. You want to make sure that you have all of the details that they're going to be needing. Now, they're going to need some information from you that we will go over here later, but also you need to have that information in a easy to understand format, and you need to understand what the loan are, the parameters of the loan, meaning how much is the seller asking for the property? What terms do you want from the bank? Do you want this interest rate? If they offer you this interest rate that's a little higher, you may say, well, I kind of need this interest rate. And if it's a little lower, just sit there and wait just a little while. Chew your gum just a little bit. Say, if they say we're offering a 7% interest rate, you say, well, what I'm looking for is about a 6. And then just sit there and wait. They may say, well, we'll give you a 6.5. Well, that's a half point better, or 50 basis points better than what you had. If you sit there long enough, they may go down to 6. They may give you what you want. Or if they say, well, we will amortize that, or you have to pay it off in 20 years, you may say, for cash flow reasons, I need that amortized on 25 years. Most loans that I get are on 25-year amortizations. Now, I've done a lot of business around Richmond, around surrounding counties, trying to get loans with other banks. If you ask them, many times you will get a 25-year amortization. Not always, but a lot of times. If you get the 25-year, you've saved yourself a lot on your monthly payment. Now, consult multiple banks again. Very important. Don't just go to a bank just because you always have. And I'm not saying don't be nice to that guy. We're going to talk more about that later. You need to build some relationships with banks and bankers, but not just one. Sometimes you may call a bank and say, listen, what interest rate you got? And he may say, well, we have 7% interest rate on 20-year AM. So you call another bank and he's got 6.5% on 25. Then you may call the first bank back and say, hey, yeah, Joe down here, he's got, 25-year at 6.5. Can you beat that? And they may want to keep your business and say, listen, we'll go 6.2 on 25. Well, not only have they now gone up to 25, but they've also given you a 25 basis points or 0.25 interest rate better. So it never hurts to shop around. So get good at that. It will pay you in the long run. You will need a good credit score. Now, a lot of banks, specifically the 700 is what they look for. Now, I know back before 2008 and 9, a lot of banks, especially out in California and some of the bigger cities in America, they really just kind of didn't look at interest or credit scores. But in Kentucky, if you're going to get a loan around here, these banks are pretty conservative. So if you want good standing, you will probably need around a 700. Now, some of them may be a little lower in the 6s, but you really, for your own interest in the future, you will get a lower interest rate the better and the higher your credit score is. If you have a real low credit score, that makes you more of a risk to the bank, because a lower credit score probably means you haven't made some payments or been late or missed them altogether. So, or someone's been in default and maybe given to credit agencies. So they look at that and they say, well, that lowers your credit score, so that means your interest that you pay them is up. So the better the credit score, the lower the interest. It's better for you. So work on your credit score. Make sure you at least go over 700. If you can go even more, that's good. The bank will need. Now, this is interesting. I grew up in a middle-class home, and when I grew up, the big thing with most people in Jackson County, it was pay everything off. Pay your house off, your cars off. If you have a farm, pay it off. If you got a tractor, it's paid off. Your barns, your cattle, everything that I got's paid off. Now, they also don't like, many middle-class people do not like telling somebody else how much money they have or what they owe on something. They don't talk about money to other people. Interesting thing about that is, wealthy people do. Middle-class and poor generally do not. Not saying anything bad about anybody. I'm just saying generally the poor and the middle class do not talk about money or what they owe, what they have, and the wealthy do. But I will say this, if you're going to go get a loan, especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to build wealth, you're going to get a loan from a guy that may not know a whole lot about you. So the only way that he has to know very much about you is by getting some documents from you that tells him monetarily and economically where you're at and how savvy you are about paying your bills and paying them on time. So he's going to want to know that. So here's some things he's going to want. Generally, they're going to want 2 or 3 years tax return. Now, you may go for one loan and it may be the same bank that you go to get your second property. They're going to want those again. And then if you go get a few months later, you go to get your third property, they're going to want those tax returns again. And every year when you get your tax returns, they're going to want you to send those new ones to them as long as you have that loan. And you will sign a piece of paper at closing saying that you will give them your tax return every year. You have to share, and you have to get good at sharing your financial information. That's part of this game. You have to realize a lot of people, especially bankers, they're going to know who you are and your economic status and your economic standing. They need to know that. So they're going to need 2 to 3 years tax return. They're going to need what's called a PFS, or a personal financial statement. Now, what that PFS tells them is how many assets you got, what you owe on those assets, and the value of those. So the value may be up here and what you owe is down here. You have a lot of equity. That will be good. If the value is here on those assets and what you owe is here, Not so good. So you've really got to work on that personal financial statement, because every time you go to get a loan, they're going to say, I need a PFS, or personal financial statement. They're going to want to know economically where you're at, the value of your property, what you owe, and how much money you have, how much money you have in the bank, all of your accounts. Do you have a retirement account, whether it's a 401, a 403, a SEP, an IRA, a Roth? They're going to want to know everything that you have. Now, if you have a lot, that's a good thing. Now, I know a lot of people don't like sharing their monetary information, but you really have to. If they're going to go 80, maybe 85% of the loan, you kind of got to give them a reason why they need to, okay? Now, rent rolls. Let's say you're buying a 10-unit apartment building. They're going to want a piece of paper that tells them who's in number 1, who's in number 2, who's in number 3, and how much they pay. And that's going to tell them give them a really good idea as to the value of that property. So let's say you got this 10-unit building and somebody's asking $1 million for it. They're going to look at it and say, well, all these are bringing in $850, and some of them $950, and some of them $1,000. Yeah, if it's bringing in over $10,000, remember the 1% rule. If they're asking $1 million, if it's bringing in $10,000 or more, it's worth $1 million. So you've got to look at that, and they will look at that. And when they run it through underwriting, that means they're doing risk analysis. So they're going to look at those rent rolls and say, he's wanting $1 million, but it's bringing in over 10,000. So yeah, it's worth that. And besides, you're putting 20% down one way or another. So you may be doing owner finance, whatever, but you're putting 20% down. So they're only out 80%. Yeah, they'll look at that and say, yeah, it's a good loan. Now, they may need your W-2s. If you work in a factory and you get paid a hourly wage, you're a W-2 employee. They're going to want to know your W-2. They're going to know if you're married. They're going to want to know how many kids you got. They're going to want to know, do you owe on your cars? If you do, how much do you owe on your cars? They're going to want to know everything financially about you. That is just their nature. And it's, again, they're giving you 80 to 85%. They're a pretty good partner. It's a good idea to share all that information. They keep it confidential, and they're really good about that. You want to partner with these guys. They're giving you 80 to 85% of this loan. Partner with them. Get the deal and cash flow, and they have most of the risk. It's the counterparty risk. They're at risk. So they're going to want this every time, and they may want additional information. When they want additional information, get it to them, and get it to them quick, okay? Now, let's say you go to a bank, they decide to do the loan. You take them all the documents they need. They do the appraisal. They send it to the lawyers. The lawyers do the title search, and it goes to closing. At closing, they're probably going to need your driver's license, may get those before closing. But the lawyers generally want your driver's license either before closing or at closing. And when you go to closing and buy that property, you will have closing costs. Now, some of those closing costs will include the appraisal. The appraisal that the bank does, you're going to have to pay for that. And when they give you what's called a HUD statement, it will be on there that how much you have to pay for the appraisal, the title search that the lawyers do, and sometimes there's various small fees. We've gone to closings before where they charge you for envelopes that they mail letters out. When they're sending letters to whoever, they will then charge you for those envelopes. Sometimes they get very creative as to the little fees that they can charge you. Now, as long as you're still cash flowing, it's just part of doing business, part of the things you got to do. Now, remember, you're trying to get a loan. You need to build a good relationship with banks and with bankers. Remember, they're the good guys. They're the guys giving you 80 to 85% of the loan. That's a pretty nice guy. Build a good relationship with him. So try to understand his position. He wants to give you that loan, but he does need to make sure that you fit in that box. Okay, they have a box. It's called risk analysis. That's what underwriting is. When you give them all this information, they're making sure you fit in that box. You fit in that box, pretty good chance you're going to get that loan. If you don't, pretty good chance you're not getting that loan. So you got to try to fit in that box. So talk to the bankers. Well, what are y'all looking for? What do you need? What can I help you? What can I get? Okay, if my credit score isn't good enough, what does it need to be? What do I need to do to get it up to that? Talk to them. The more that you talk to them, the more you know what they want, the easier it is to give it to them. Now, here's one little bitty small thing I do. Almost every time when I go to a closing or I go to talk to a banker, I make sure I have something to drink. Now, this is a really small thing. You don't have to do this, but I do. I just like to make sure maybe a lot of times it's a cup of coffee. Okay, and I've got it in one of these to-go cups, and that way when I'm sitting there, I don't go in and here's what I'm doing. This is not what I do. Here's what a lot of people do. They go in and they say, yeah, I'd like $1 million and I'd like that at 6% interest and will you give me the loan? That is very mechanical and very cold. Okay, so I want to go in, I have my cup of coffee and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him. Most of the time, I want to talk to him about something personal. Him, his family, what he's interested in. So I try to talk to him and find out. Then once I find out what he's interested in, I try to talk to him. And then I'm sitting there and I'm getting a drink of coffee just every now and then. And I want most of the conversation to be about him. And I'm drinking my coffee because now I'm not just sitting there trying to get a loan from him. Now I'm his buddy. And he looks at me more favorably because now we're just sitting around talking about stuff rather than the whole meeting being about a loan that I'm trying to get, especially if it's my first time. He doesn't know anything about me. He doesn't feel comfortable with me. All he knows is a little bit of the monetary stuff, where I'm at monetarily. So I want him to know who I am as a person, and I want to know who he is, and I want him to feel comfortable. So I'm sitting there drinking a cup of coffee, talking with a friend. If you do things like that, it just gives them a better feel about you. So realize they are people too. They want to make a loan. That's how banks make money, by loaning you money. Then when you pay them back, you're paying them back with interest. So they make money from you. They want to give you that loan. Realize that. But you do have to fit in that box. You have to go through that risk analysis and you have to fit in that box. If you do, odds are really good you will get that loan and you can become redneck rich.